Hello, I'm Jordan. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a book I just finished, and that's Andersonville by McKinley Cantor. This book won the Pulitzer Prize in, I think, 1955. I just heard about it for the first time from Kelly over at Books I'm Not Reading when she did her Pulitzer Prize series of videos, so I'll leave a link to that down below. But this is it's a historical fiction novel about the Andersonville prisoner of war camp in the American Civil War. And I'm no expert, but as I understand it, the Civil War is kind of notorious for being a bit of a rehearsal for some of the kind of atrocities that would come in the 21st century. There was trench warfare, there were ironclad battleships, and the Andersonville POW camp in a lot of ways resembled what would later become known as concentration camps. There was mass starvation and rampant disease. The mortality rate was unbelievably high. Thousands of people died. So it's kind of a heavy book, needless to say. But the way it's done, I think, is quite, oh Lord, is quite masterful. There's kind of a loose, overarching structure, and there's regarding the Claffey family, which is a Southern aristocratic family who own a plantation near the prison. I believe the prison was in Georgia. And the book kind of begins and ends with this family. And they do appear and they play a prominent role in the central portion of the book, but really the central portion of the book and the bulk of the book is about the prison. And the way it's done is, I think, extremely effective. What Cantor does is he basically has a series of interconnected short stories, mostly dealing with totally separate characters. And in that way, it kind of reminded me a lot of The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which has a kind of similar approach. But yeah, so you'll get these long chapters about a single character. Sometimes characters will reappear over the course of several chapters. Sometimes they only get one chapter per person. And the effect is, I think, really, really well done, partly because Cantor is such a magnificent storyteller. One of the aspects of that, I think, is his ability to create fascinating, very, very in-depth digressions, which may not sound entertaining, but it totally is. You will get dozens of pages of backstory on this character that is absolutely mesmerizing. A character that dies in the same chapter that he appears in. It's really quite effective. And, as a result, you get a kind of perhaps an uneven kind of book. And at first, I wasn't sure what to think of that because the tone of this book shifts a lot. Not only will you get the perspective of some of the prisoners, but you also get the perspective of some of the Confederate administration that was running the prison. And those chapters are quite funny. They're almost satirical, which feels a bit out of place. But then the way Cantor writes is, it kind of reminds me of Faulkner, where you have a bunch of narrative voices kind of all speaking at once, if that makes sense. So the tone is going to be a little uneven, I think, on purpose. And also, you have the kind of very solemn, almost biblical rhythm to the language that I really enjoy in Faulkner. That's definitely a part of this book too. But anyways, yeah, like I said, the effect is just kind of this boiling stew of life and desperation at the heart of this prison, without any kind of overarching value or message. Which is a very, very interesting way to write about history, I think. Usually you'll have, when you're reading historical fiction, there will be a kind of moral approach maybe, or at least a kind of, there's an assessment of what was happening, I guess. Maybe that's just the stuff I've read. But this does not do that. What it does is it tries to give you a sense of not meaning, but a sense of how it was, just through exploring various different perspectives on that. And in that way, it kind of reminded me of War and Peace a little bit by Tolstoy. But what was I going to say? Oh, right. So what you get also is an unbelievable sense of detail and, I guess, verisimilitude. It feels unbelievably genuine and real, without ever feeling like it's just showing off Cantor's research, which had to have been incredible. I believe he took many, many years to write this, and it feels like that. The detail is amazing, and the dialogue is absolutely, it's just totally convincing in a way that dialogue often isn't, in my opinion. So that's great. That's all things I love about this book. I do have a couple issues with it, and I think they're kind of small. Number one, like I said, it's framed by the Claffeys, who are this aristocratic Southern family who own the plantation nearby. And as a framing narrative, which they that's the purpose they serve, in my opinion, they're not all that effective, partly because Ira Claffey, who is the kind of patriarch of the family, and if there is a protagonist of this book, it's him. He's kind of, I think the term is a Mary Sue, in that he is too perfect. He's unbelievably wise and generous, and it's not believable. And then there's the uncomfortable fact that he's a slave owner, which is never really explored all that much. That's another issue with this. This book has, I think, over 60 chapters, most of which are told by are devoted to totally different characters. Only one of those characters is a slave. Slavery is largely absent from this book, which is not a huge issue, but it does, at least to a modern reader, it feels a little disingenuous, I guess. And also, Cantor seems unwilling to even call them slaves often. He refers to them often as servants. Well, they weren't servants. Sorry, another situation here. They weren't servants, they were slaves. So that's a little uncomfortable. Not to say that it's a racist book. I don't think it is. And slavery is addressed to a certain extent, particularly in the end. But it didn't feel all that satisfying. And also, there is a love story in this book, which doesn't, I mean, it's okay. It doesn't really convince, and it doesn't have the power that a lot of the other stories do. I think the book is most powerful when you're getting these backstories of these prisoners. You're getting their entire life story and all of their hopes and dreams and fears and vices, and then watching them die often, or not always, but often. I think that's where the power of the book is in those short stories, as it were. But yeah, it's a fantastic book, honestly. I'm not sure if it's going to be all that interesting to people who aren't Americans. I think it would be, because the writing is so magnificent. It's a really just mesmerizing story in the way that it's written. Cantor was a fabulous storyteller, I guess. He's a writer I've never even heard of, and apparently he has a large body of work, so I will certainly be exploring more of him in the future. So thank you to Kelly for opening my eyes to this one. And yeah, that's my thoughts on Andersonville. If you read it, let me know. Maybe it's as better known than it seemed to me, but I had never heard of it. So yeah, let me know what you think if you've read it, and thanks for watching.